And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly. This week, talking U11 Plus and U11 Life, T-Mobile and Sprint prepping for a merger, and Apple has some discussion over their Touch ID, Face ID, some of the controversies from videos that have been posted, while we also have a hot, sexy new phone from Razer to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 277 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded November 3rd at 12:30 Pacific time, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphone, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and a Razer cell phone was a very different kind of cell phone. As always, I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, blasting the signal from sunny Southern California, joined as always by plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wong out on the East Coast. How's it going, buddy boy?
It was also missing a letter too. Like you
Yeah,
bought and sold vowels at your will, and
it was a
basically I'll
wheel
take that
phone. It
for
absolutely was.
400. Like, it was a wheel or a slab or a little thing of fortune. Whereas this is, we'll talk about this in our rubber half of the podcast. But it is, I hear it's a badass, smooth thing, and all I can see of it is just a black slab, which is supposedly just smooth and kind of Spartan in its design.
Yeah,
I've kept calling
someone
it Spartan.
someone summed it up. I can't remember. I should have put this in my notes. Someone on Jaime's first look video made a joke about this being like the next bit Robin going through its edgy emo phase. It's like that's actually pretty funny.
That would be a sophomore decision, I guess, in terms of doing
Right?
that. I mean,
You're
Scott
gonna
was
take our
like,
phone
"Hey,
seriously.
yeah." Scott Croyle was like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna make this my statement. I'm gonna leave this a little bit and just head out Razor. I'm gonna go with flying flames all over the way."
That's true, but we should probably jump into some tech commentary before we get into those shenanigans. Mr. Wong, how might people get in contact with us for this show?
Oh yeah, that's right. I should probably turn up the Twitter page right now because
It's hilarious that you
if
just said that because if you can't hear, I'm typing in the background as I too pull up the Twitter page.
hilariously, and we actually do most of all of our live interactions. If you're watching live at 3:30 on the Eastern time zone, although sooner or later here in Boston we may be moving into the Atlantic time zone, but that's neither here nor there. What we want you is to be here with the hashtag PN Weekly so that we can see your comments. We can't do the YouTube live because even with slow mode, it's still ridiculous how fast those things come along.
Yeah, we appreciate
And
the
also
commentary. That chatter is great, but we can't produce a show and keep up with it at the same time.
hashtag PN Weekly is the thing, and we'll be able to see you there live. And if you can't be here live, if you still want to ask a question, we do a mailbag episode every so often, end of the month, and we should do that this month as well.
Yeah, no, I
Would that be
like
our
someone fronted the plan that we should do mailbag at the end of the month, and I thought that was a great idea. So,
Now I'm wondering if that would be our Black Friday episode this month.
oh, what? No, I don't think so. I think we'd have one more.
Would
I
that be?
think so.
Because it's the fourth Thursday, and usually that's the last one. But
Oh, maybe you're
how
right. So our mailbag episode would be the 24th.
20? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. All right, we'll have to chat about that. I might be I,
Yeah.
I might be broadcasting from an airport. We'll have to check in
That
on
could
that.
be a good idea. We'll be doing a remote podcast. It'll sound great. Podcast at pocketnow.com to get to the point of things because that'd be an interesting one. So definitely we want the echoes of the airport blasting out all the answers to your questions for whenever you might be talking about things that are related to tech, mobile tech. We would appreciate that. In the meantime, Twitter, hashtag PN Weekly. Let's get on with the show. Let's
Yeah,
talk
let's talk about
about some
TC.
that has been enriched, that has been added to, that has been plussed in some manner.
As one might be inclined to discuss. And of course, we are talking about none other than the HTC U11.
plus life
plus life
to 12
now.
million thing.
So I
Okay.
mean, like you
Yeah.
sort of alluded to this in the video's title. I mean, do you think that we might be looking at HTC's attempt at trying to build a Pixel 2 XL?
So this was circulated about with The Verge. They were talking about this with one of their sources, and it sort of extended the lore a bit because it did sound like that this was in the plans as the U11 series that was planned for
Mhm.
2017. There were going to be three in the early part of the year, and all of them had code names inside HTC that
Right.
had to do with Ocean, Ocean Master, Ocean Note, Ocean, just Ocean,
Right.
and
And we ultimately only got the U Ultra and the U11.
yeah, basically, and the
Yeah.
Uplay, but no one talks about the Uplay. It's still a cute little thing.
No. Okay, so that's on me. I keep forgetting about the Uplay.
No, 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 no. It's all right. I mean, it doesn't really deserve, but I just like this is just me saying, oh, I sort of like that little cute thing because he was still, I don't know.
His
Anyways, between
YT
there was
smartphone.
yeah, between the time like before the U11 was launched, we sort of dropped off this Ocean Master device for a little
Mhm.
bit. And then there was the talk about the Google Pixel 2 devices. Originally, there was going to be a Walleye, which would be the regular Pixel 2. And then there was Timon, or no, Muskie. Muskie was first. Those were
Right.
the only two, 2 and 2XL. And then there was this little Timon thing that came up, which was even larger and or something, and supposedly LG had something to do with that. And between all that jostling around, we finally found out, yeah, LG is making the screens for the Pixel 2 XL, so that's interesting. And oh, they're also making the Pixel 2 XL itself, so
Yeah.
that sort of made sense. And that's when we start, like a little bit after that was when we started picking up on the Ocean Master again. Like it was revived. I don't think
Mhm.
there was a sense of continuity somewhere, and
Yeah.
that was starting to be talked about as what we see here today as the HTC U11 Plus. So Pixel 2 XL and the U11 Plus, there are definitely a lot of similarities, a lot of the same specs going on. It would
Yeah.
just have to be that the Pixel, internal design language and how the PCB would have to be spread apart, and also the supply chain. Those would be different aspects to that, which would have to be a local. So
Totally.
there you
Well, and
go.
and so I mean, when we're starting to dig into this story, um, HTC wasn't responsible for assembling the Pixel 2 XL. I mean that's all in-house LG, correct?
Yeah, it would the assemblage would be LG.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of interesting, like as we're watching these sort of timelines unfold, and one of the things that you were pointing to in that Verge story is we know that a certain section of HTC manufacturing is just going to go and live over at Google now. And one of the reasons for that, at least stated reasons, is to try and help abbreviate the time in working with partners to building device, incorporating new software development into the hardware, optimizing it all. And so it's still been, I think, one of the curious aspects of this Pixel launch is that they still worked with two different manufacturers when now the U11 Plus comes along to sort of illustrate that HTC has been involved in trying to manufacture, sort of a more 2017 design language phone, a more current device than what the U11 represented. And so I think it's just sort of that curiosity. We'll never get the full inside scoop what these companies are going through
Yeah.
internally, the negotiations, the partnerships, the relationships. But we see this come out, and I just think it's really interesting that HTC was already on this kind of design language. They could have probably fulfilled the manufacturer of the Pixel 2 XL.
Yeah, and I mean, Google has really made a point of just saying this is our stuff, this is our design, and we made it. But well, I mean, to be honest, it's it's a totally, I mean, I'm saying this as if it's 2016. It's a totally different mission. We're talking about this as a consumer oriented front, and that it doesn't really matter who the ODM is, although we have since been painfully reminded that ODMs do matter, that supply chain does matter, because people are staring at the screens, people are wondering what the heck is going on at Google itself.
Yeah.
I think the most troubling part is Google QA, because at the you can make the units at HTC and LG, but when you start shipping boxes with slip paper that say that
Right, that
cosmetic damage.
Yeah, when it didn't pass QA and they still ship the phone. No, see, this is I think this is a fair criticism of where we're at with Google as a first party manufacturer now, is they don't have the Nexus excuse to hide behind anymore. You know, like, you don't have as made by Huawei or made by LG on the back of your Google phone. This is a made by Google device. And if you're going to make that claim, then you have to be responsible for the support for the QA, and the buck stops with Google, not with LG, not with HTC. But I mean, I kind of want to get back to the U11 Plus. I think this is a part of the conversation when we see HTC is still producing and releasing products. This is a second half of the year flagship. It's really late in the second half of the year, but it's a second half of the year flagship, just as we're going to start getting ready for conversations and rumors about Galaxy S9s and LG G7s and things like that.
I
Where
think
do
it was
you
the same time frame as with the Bolts last year, aka the
Pretty similar,
10
yeah.
Evo, and also the 1A9, which was kind of the start of a new push for the fall flagship.
Yeah, and then also I think HTC's distribution on this is a little wonky too, as to whether it's coming to what regions this phone will eventually be dropped off in.
Plus,
Also,
it's not going to be North America, which is a
yeah,
shame, and I hate it. And while I do like the U11 Life at least coming to T-Mobile, because it's been rough times trying to get HTC into the carriers these days. It's going to be with the Sense version, and I really would have liked to have seen what it would be like with Android One, which
yeah.
is going to be around the world, as opposed to just the US. But I don't know.
But yeah, so I mean, just real quick, I mean, kind of like detailing what this phone is. I mean, we've been talking a lot about it. We actually even just said what the phone is. It's a Snapdragon 835, 64 gigabytes of internal storage, 4 gigabytes of RAM, or an option for 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage. And it looks like the 12 megapixel ultra pixel sensor with an f1.7 aperture is making its return. And the biggest change from HTC's current design language is incorporating the taller aspect ratio display. And the 3 color options, I think one is really techie cool in not just having a black and a silver. We also have sort of a dark
Jeez.
translucent where you can see all of the guts of your phone
When are we going to
behind the
get
glass.
over the Game Boy
I like
Color?
it. I say do it. Anything that helps a company stand out. I mean, this is. I was hoping to see a U11 in solar red, because I thought that was one of the most aggressive, visible design choices any company
Yeah,
has
that was
made
a sexy
this year.
little thing, man.
That's a
It was
gorgeous
just
look
it
for
was
a dual
J.J.
tone phone.
Abrams quality stuff, where you can get the light flares of blue
I
going
was gonna
into it.
say, if you want your phone to be the cause of lens flare, not just capturing photos with lens flare.
Oh yeah.
So I was hoping to see something like that, and I think HTC's actually succeeded in a discussion piece. Your phone as a conversation piece. The translucent U11, I think achieves that. At least it's more interesting than a lot of the other glass back devices that we've been playing with recently. So all in all, this is, again, I think it's more evidence that HTC manufacturing can still churn out a good phone, but not releasing in North America makes me nervous for the future of what's left at HTC, and that all of the talent on flagships may have been migrated over to Google.
Well, the thing is with HTC, they've always done the extra models going into like the 1M9 plus, 10 plus, or whatever the heck they
Yeah,
had for like S.
that's right.
and these little weird things, and they went out to Europe or to certain parts of Asia. They were market specific, and I don't think that what we dealt with back then is the same as here, because this is a secondary flagship with like a change, a leading transition of a feature, that being the 2x1 display. I don't
Yeah,
think that is fair to the market, or to
but that's what I mean.
whatever HTC.
There's
Yeah.
so much manufacturing from the U11 that the company has already sort of landed on. You know, this is a U11 with a taller aspect ratio display. So this is what I mean. Like the last sort of year of HTC devices, because the U11 was probably what, a year and a half, 2 years in development.
Mhm.
And so whatever was left from that time frame in 2 years, will we see the brain drain moving people from HTC over to Google start to affect the manufacturing of devices in 2020? And that's, you know, that's that open-ended big clickbaity hype question. Is HTC going to be gone in 2 years?
HTC
But
2020.
you know, this is also where I'm kind of pointing to phones like the U11 Life. You know, HTC globally still has a reputation and finds some success in making mid-rangers and entry-level devices. They've been having difficulties in their flagship end, especially for Western markets and in Europe. So now this is where I'm concerned that the team of HTC employees that went over to Google might represent that flagship design team. And this could be that slow process of pulling HTC IP over to Google without having to face the same kind of nitpicking or the same kind of criticism that Google faced when they bought out Motorola. You know, so this gives HTC plenty of time to figure out what to do with the Vive. They'll exist as a mid-ranger brand across the world, and whatever flagship talent they have will now be dedicated towards Pixel 3 and Pixel 4.
Well, I mean, that could be it, but they're still gunning for 5 or 6 or 7 flagship or whatever models, smartphone models,
Yeah,
next year as well. And they're smart to keep on that schedule. I'm not sure if even that is sustainable.
right.
So
And to be perfectly fair, I am reading a lot into one smartphone release.
yeah,
So we do have a tweet from Ron the Great using the PN Weekly hashtag U11 Plus not coming to the US is worrisome, but people can import it, and that's my plan. So it looks like I know for a fact there are still some HTC friendly folks out there, especially in our audience, people who are
mhm.
watching our videos and watching and listening to our podcasts. And so if you're considering, does this help close the gap between HTC and the competition? Is this sort of up your alley, a device that's going to be the right fit for you? Drop us some comments, shoot us some emails, shoot us some tweets, because I think also anyone launching a phone in this quarter, we're already facing those conversations of how's it going to stack up against next year's new phones, probably landing sometime around March. And that's already, if you're talking about a $700, $800, $900 investment, you know, to turn around and know that in 3 months you're going to see a ton of headlines about what's new and the next generation of hardware and Android Oreo 8.1, and what does that mean for the device that's currently in your pocket?
I think that they can't afford to keep up with this whole going with the numbers thing, because we had the 7, M7, M8, and 9. Then it was like, hey, it's the 10, it's the perfect 10. And it's starting not to make sense with the
The
11.
HTC
And I
10
think that's
was a great phone. It was a perfect 10. It's just no one bought it.
yeah, exactly. But still, like, what are we is there anything clever about going into the number 12? Like,
I don't know.
ugh, man.
And because you know you want to make, like, you know, for HTC 13 you have like your baker's dozen, but you were saying that you kind of liked what you saw for the U11 Life making it to T-Mobile. What is it that you're seeing in that phone? What makes this stand out for you
Oh,
opposite
I
some of
mean,
these other like mid-rangers?
just boring old specs. I mean, really, it's one of the first with the new generation 600 series processors that
Hmm.
is going to be widely available in the US, unless like the G. Wait, the G5S from Moto have like the 620.
Yeah. Well,
So
does the
this has the
T5 have
six.
the 630 or the 625? I can't remember now. Because I think you might be right that this might be the first with the 630 to have a proper North American release, not just like that we could import another
Yeah,
manufacturer.
yeah,
I'll
and
have to look that up.
oh,
I'm probably
we'll,
wrong.
we'll we'll look that up sooner or later. It has the apparently it has the 430 in India at least, so I'm assuming it's going to have the 430 on
Yeah,
its way.
sorry, India. They never give you
Wah,
guys
wah.
the good chipset, do they?
But
Wah, wah.
this is going to be a little bit of a little litmus test in terms of how we expect things to go. We love the 625 in
Love the
many phones,
625.
not just the BlackBerry key one. So
Yeah,
this could
Moto
be
has done
another
really
make or
well with the
break.
625 too. So this is a 5.2 inch full HD 1080p display. It's an LCD, so you won't have to worry about any blue or red tint if you tilt the phone and you look at it off axis. The
Perfectly
Snapdragon 630,
acceptable. Yeah.
3 GB of RAM, and I don't have and a 16 megapixel camera. So that's not
And
bad. That's not
not ba-
bad for
it's not bad paper specs. I mean, and with the price at 300 at T-Mobile and
350. Yeah.
well, yeah, and 350 for HTC with the Android One, maybe. I'm not sure if that international markets, North America, it's going to be cents.
Yeah.
Which
Well, and
sense?
this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, no. It's just I'm trying to think about how we feel about sense these days because it's starting. It's if we were talking about it getting a little older, like long in the tooth
Right.
last year, then you have to wonder
I'm
how far
feeling I'm
along.
feeling okay with the skin if you can get your hands on the 630 series phone. I would be very concerned about performance on a Qualcomm 400 series phone running a skin like Sense. I mean, and I'm sure it's been optimized. HTC has some great software developers. I know it's not going to be the same beast that we were left with like the 1M9.
We really
But
need we really need something like Sense 5, where it's just you
right.
took away all the skeuomorphism and you really just
Right.
muted
Although
everything.
I do miss what was it? Was it Touch Flow back on Windows Phone, Windows Mobile back in the day where you would have like the analog flap clock? I
Yes.
had to install. So I
Uh,
threw I finally got I don't even know where my phone is. So I've put Nova Launcher back on my V30. I wanted something cleaner than
yeah.
LG's sort of front interface. And when you do that, you lose the LG clock widget. So I go and I get my beautiful widgets. And if anyone has a suggestion for a better weather clock widget, please send it my way because I'm so out of touch with what's new there. So I throw it on there, and of course, the first clock that Beautiful Widgets has up is that like old school 1970s flappy clock. And you're just like, we've
Yeah.
so far left that visual look on our phones. It's so old. It just brought me all the way back to like Touch
It
Flow.
had a long
So
ass
terrible.
run. Yeah.
It had a
2000 and like everyone was still doing that even up through 2015. They were
yeah.
just placing it there because they couldn't just do
We
without it.
just didn't
I
know
don't
how to
know.
quit you 1970s flappy clock. So pretty terrible. But no, this what I think is so critical about HTC with the U11 Life here. IP67 water resistant. I don't know that we've seen many devices, again, with proper targeted North American launches that have included rated water resistance for under $400. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, this to me speaks of a company that is finally figuring out how to compete in North America with attractive phone design and reasonable mid-range specs and not just making an iPhone clone like they did with the one A9.
It's
This
great design. It's
well, and
terrific design.
it's HTC design. It's not because people will throw these things back and forth like, oh, well, Apple copied HTC's antenna bands. And I think that's true. But when you look at an HTC M1 phone versus an HTC A1 phone, that A9 was as close as we'd ever seen an iPhone
To an
clone get to
iPhone. Yeah.
looking like an iPhone. And this is an HTC design language. It's HTC DNA, camera placement, look, polished glass on the back, and incorporating important lifestyle features that flagship phone owners are going to care
This
about,
is what
and not doing it at $500 where the one A9 launched.
I would like to see this as like replacing the Desire. Is like this
Oh, I
could be
definitely
a
think,
great
definitely.
prepaid phone.
Absolutely. And this is probably going to be, I mean, you throw a plastic back on this phone and we're probably looking at a Desire phone. You know what I
two
mean?
hundred
Like,
dollars.
yeah. So this to me, like, if we lose HTC flagships, but HTC becomes a force in the mid-range where we can continue to expect high quality lifestyle grade devices, you know, this to me looks like a phone that will do a very good job of not only covering the basics but giving you a little bit more than that. People were
This seems
complaining about
yeah.
the
This seems like
625. Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
This seems like the first phone in which HTC has not just priced it above everything else. It wasn't stubborn with that, because they have been sticklers even throughout their portfolio for just keeping it just a little bit above, just scoring that premium on the design of things, which to their credit was pretty nice, but it didn't make sense with depreciation and with the specs and with everything else considering.
And so I just got this from Random P. Moto X4 is IP68 water resistant, under $400, and has a headphone jack. So yeah, I forgot
Yeah.
about the X4, but it's we're still talking about a rarity in this market of having those kinds of
Forget about
products.
the X4. It's on Project Fi.
Yeah.
I could have gotten it. I didn't.
Well, and then also I
It's
just
all
like
right.
I love those conversations. Yeah, and it has a headphone jack. You're like, no, that's actually fair play.
And
I don't
yeah,
know how
I
good the
mean,
headphone
in
jack
this
is because I haven't been impressed with Moto's audio hardware of late, but it does have the convenience of that jack being built in.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, I got these Jabra, whatever the
Oh,
heck you call
you
them,
got the Elite Sports?
Elite 25E, which has
Yeah,
been doing an
Jaime was
okay job.
gushing over those. We did we had it published late. We did like a little headphone review roundup from not headphone review, a headphone roundup from IFA.
Yeah,
And like I was spending some time with Baradynamic and I was walking over to Sennheiser. And the time that I spent, oh, I also hit up Aftershocks because I love Aftershocks. The time I spent going to 3 different booths to shoot footage, Jaime was playing with the Elite 25s that whole time, just Jabra all by
yeah.
himself. He loves Jabra. Loves Jabra. It's hilarious.
Battery life has lived up to all expectations.
What did they claim that the
They
runtime was?
claimed 18 hours,
Wow.
and don't like I haven't had enough continuous usage to really get a context on that, but it
Right.
seems like if not 18 hours, at least 16, because maybe there's a little thing going on between
Yeah.
when I sleep. But in terms of like the fit on the ears is the best that I've ever had, and that's because they have the elongated
That's
earbuds, the tips.
I got to get back to some proper like neckband sport buds. I think I'm gonna go back to maybe my LG Tone Actives.
That's their secret.
I spent some time with Trend Labs. They make these really
Yeah.
inexpensive, truly wireless earbuds, and
Yeah.
they work well. They actually do, but it is a lifestyle shock going to a wireless audio solution that can barely last the length of a Joe Rogan podcast.
Mhm.
Like when you're running on fumes after a couple
Yeah.
hours, you're like, this is so cool. It's so flexible. I've got individual earbuds. I can go to one earbud, use both, but I know they don't
Yeah.
last very long.
And
So
I mean, I guess there
pros and
had to
cons.
have been a reason for the for the AirPod stems, because
Oh yeah.
battery
A
going
little
in
bit better
there.
battery capacity, and that's also why I think the companies that have been more successful in this space, the earbuds are bigger. I think Jabra's new current generation, it's like they had the and this is coming from Jaime,
Yeah.
and Jaime will do a better job of talking up Jabra than I will.
We're
But
gonna have him on
explaining,
next week.
yeah, we should just like, can you just talk about Jabra for an hour, and then he will.
Yeah.
No, the talking to their product rep about how their design was, can we make truly wireless earbuds that at above medium volume can last for an average competitor's marathon. And you're like, oh, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. No one's going to want to recharge earbuds in the middle of a marathon. And so that is a design philosophy actually I think makes a lot of sense, because that carries over into just general lifestyle. Are you really going to have these things in your ears playing audio for more than 4 or 5 hours at a stretch? Probably not. If you can hit that window, great. But then for some of the less expensive solutions, we're maybe a third that time, maybe a quarter of that time. So let's get into some other news. HTC, we've got stories on the HTC U11 Plus and the U11 Life, so you can definitely check that out on Pocketnow.com. And you were going to add
Renato Laporte, OMG, beautiful widgets. So 2010, some gadget guy, weather timeline. I love it.
You know what, Renato? I'm going to pull that up right now while we're doing this podcast. Downloading the app
#PN
will probably sever my connection to Hangouts because my internet sucks, as brought to you by Spectrum Cable.
And before we leave the whole topic too, Zane Winter, do you think Android One is a better implementation of the old Google Play Edition phones? And personally, I think it's equivalent. Like you didn't really understand the whole mission of Google Play Edition phones, and that they used flagship and or something. I don't know. Like there was a whole mission thing, and there wasn't really much awareness of it. Whereas this is. It's a shame that we're talking about mid-range phones or whatever.
Entry level and mid-range, yeah. Zane, I think it's interesting because we're looking at different philosophies. Google Play Edition was really trying to showcase, like Jules is saying, that sort of flagship grade product, but supported by Google. And it's really kind of sad that that experiment didn't resonate more. But it was also at a time where Google really had no relationship directly to consumers buying hardware. It was just very ill-timed. What I think is so positive about Android One, the people who are out there not spending $700, $800, $900,000 on a phone are often the ones who are receiving far worse support from their manufacturers, especially in terms of software. And if Google can find a way to execute timely updates, bug fixes, security patches for people who can't afford the top of the line, I think that just speaks to a better culture and a better climate for everybody buying any kind of smartphone or computing device. I would be far more inclined to recommend Android One to someone who's also looking to save some cash, or they're on a budget, they're budget conscious, than some sort of off-brand or sort of less well-known manufacturer in the same space. Maybe they can offer some better hardware, maybe they can offer some cooler features, but I really don't like the idea of someone spending $200 to $300 on a phone and then being left out in the cold for support. And it's not enough at that price point to say, oh, well, you could root your phone and install other ROMs. Like, there really does need to be a culture of holding manufacturers up to higher standards. The future of our economy, the future of all of our services, all comes down to data-driven devices. And if they can't expect good security, good support, and we're kind of leaving a lot of people out in the cold.
Yeah. And speaking of data and support and all that, do you want to head into the news? Or
yeah, let's hit the news block.
Yeah, let's do that. For the week of October 9, 2017, this is all the news that is fit to podcast. T-Mobile CEO John Legere is reported to have contacted Sprint CEO Marcel Ore about a new offer to merge. Sprint and SoftBank chairman Masayoshi Son had developed some reservations about a prior merger deal that would have left him out of control of one of his largest foreign assets. No terms of this new deal have been put out just yet. Apparently, the Axon M is its own thing, as ZTE USA has confirmed to friend of the show, Andrew Wallace, that a sequel to the Axon 7 is planned. We're not sure if it's going to be called Axon 8, but that have cherished in this new Axon line. You have something to celebrate, I guess. Apple, in its ensuing antitrust legal battles with Qualcomm, is said to be considering modems from other companies like Intel, which has provided some of the modems for some of the iPhones this year and last year, and even MediaTek. Yeah, we're talking about those people from Taiwan. From next year, there is a growing of counter litigation to deal with between Apple and Qualcomm. It doesn't look like there's a settlement in the cards for at least watch this space. Dan Riccio, Apple's SVP for hardware engineering, has now twice insisted to TechCrunch and Mashable that Touch ID was never part of the grand design for the iPhone X, 10, whatever you call it. We have also learned today that the original due date for the 10 was next year, but through, quote, hard work determination, it is now a 2017 phone. Nothing was really told of that. And why. Finally, Best Buy has stopped offering iPhone 10 buyers the option to pay a lump sum for their iPhone 10 and also have to pay a $100 surcharge for it, as it is basically doing the carrier's bidding of selling the phones through their respective financing options. It doesn't really make a turn unless Best Buy decides to, I don't know, activate their phones at the store. So that's where the $100 kickback comes in. And if the carrier's not going to pay,
they're fighting that it's they're fighting the calling it a kickback, but
well, yeah, that's true. But
yeah,
they are a middle manager in terms of that process. And they provide an alternative. They want to be an alternative to Apple stores who have people lining up.
Well, actually, let's jump in on that to discuss news. I had not heard of any other retailers that would be supporting iPhone 10. I mean, like back in the day, we had Radio Shacks all over the place that basically just became mini stores for other carriers and stuff. I hadn't heard of any other retail outlet trying to do the same thing. Like, you're not going to walk into a Target, activate an iPhone 10, and have to pay a $100 premium on that. And is that in part because, like, you just won't see iPhone 10 at Target, or is it just this Best Buy relationship is singular to how they work with carriers, do you think?
I mean, Apple talks with the carriers, and then Apple sells its phones. And whether or not the carriers take up so much stock, they have control of their own stock, and they decide, hey, let's send them over to Best Buy, where we get them to work with us in terms of our financing deals, our phones, and it's a case where Best Buy doesn't have access to the OEM, because otherwise they'd be working
Best Buy stock is actually filled by the carriers. That's right.
That's what I'm saying here, because if it were Motorola, if it were Nokia, that'd be great. But Apple really clutching at its
I forgot about that.
The iPhone 10.
So they're correct in saying it's not a kickback, because if the phone's priced the same at a carrier as it's priced at a Best Buy, then basically all you did was give all the money to the carrier, because Best Buy had to buy that stock from the carrier. That's okay. So in the blog post, sorry, I've got it pulled up in front of me now, finally. My internet super slow, as brought to you by Spectrum Cable. So quoting from their article, from
never their a sponsor.
No, not our sponsor, but this podcast is literally being broadcast from.
No, I'm saying it's never going to be a sponsor of this podcast.
It never will be. I actually, well, unless they want to dump a ton of money in my lap, I will kindly ask them just to give me a fiber solution. This is from the Best Buy blog. These unactivated phones were priced higher than those we sold with a contract to reflect the fact that the phone carriers only pay us when a phone we've sold has been activated on their network. So yeah, this smells, this looks bad. This doesn't sound great. I can understand where a retailer is saying this phone is on our store shelves, people want to buy the phone from us, but we can't profit from that activity unless we just build in a premium. Unfortunately for Best Buy, because the optics on this look terrible, it's one of those, like, if you want to sell iPhones, you better hope that you're going to make your nut back by combining it with accessory purchases, just like we do with like printers.
Yeah.
Why for so long you would buy a printer and it wouldn't have a USB cable in the box? It was because Best Buy couldn't make any money on the printer unless they sold you a $30 gold-plated USB cable.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I understand to some point that Best Buy was trying to offer that options. They wanted to be a secondary option, and it had limited stock to offer. And because of the nature of iPhones, where they're basically SIM free, they're not really tied to anyone unless you get certain CDMA enabled and GSM, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's tough, and I don't think that they should have finagled the situation,
Totally.
because that was just a
Well, and
risk that
actually,
they
Jules, that's kind of a good transition point, because I do want to touch quickly, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it because I'm sure this is going to be a story developing more aspects of the story over time. But talking about Apple and Qualcomm, we instantly saw this generation of iPhones. There were the stories coming out about the different variations, whether or not you were really getting the same kind of LTE performance, and people recommending, if you were going to buy an iPhone, buy the Verizon variant, because then that had a Qualcomm modem in it, because it had to support CDMA technology, which also in turn, even on a GSM carrier, delivered faster LTE speeds. I wonder how Apple will be able to build phones for North America without utilizing Qualcomm components. I don't understand how they can support Sprint or Verizon over the next year or two, until I guess everyone's just LTE for everything, without that kind of modem support.
Yeah, I mean, the whole litigation started up throughout the course of this year, and we've seen the supply and chain, I guess, kind of grind to a halt.
Hmm.
That This is where I can say kickbacks, because that's what's being described in the antitrust suits, and the whole complicated cycle of how parts manufacturers have to pay Qualcomm a royalty and whatever. So at this point, um, we're we're looking at Intel perhaps taking the whole of the kit and caboodle,
Yeah.
or perhaps MediaTek starting to mix into that. And
Yeah.
I don't
Well, I
know.
think I think Intel probably makes the most sense as a main components supplier. I'm unfortunately I'm not very familiar with MediaTek chipsets in general. So
MediaTek
I
started to be able to produce CDMA parts too.
really.
So yeah, that's what we saw with the LG X Charge on Sprint, I think,
Oh, I did not know that was a MediaTek. That's really interesting.
yeah,
So
that
I'm
was.
sure. So you know what? Maybe one of the things about this story is the fact that if Apple is going to start pulling suppliers to manufacture, en masse, and they're looking at a supplier like MediaTek, then it's probably just built into the contract that MediaTek is the company that's licensing Qualcomm's patents on CDMA connectivity, and that then Apple's just doing business with MediaTek to supply the actual part that's coming in. Something like that, I think, could actually make a lot of sense. I didn't know that there was another player out there who was outfitting CDMA compatible radios. I thought Qualcomm still had the monopoly on that.
Perhaps, and monopoly is kind of the term that is being wielded around, but still in
Well,
dispute.
it's the
Because
ugly aspect of
yeah,
even having CDMA shouldn't exist. Like it was a way like to kind of create the illusion of competition in the United States, but it was never going to
competition.
be the world technology. It was never going to play at the world stage. So Qualcomm has this coup, and I don't mean this to sound as flip or as dismissive of Qualcomm,
That's
but
true,
they scored a coup in being the only company that was really building high quality radios and modems to
and that's
support
why
CDMA.
Sprint went into WiMAX.
Yeah. Oh, WiMAX. I mean, what was it? Was it my
Evo
no, it was. It was the
4G,
no, it wasn't the Evo. It was the Epic. Was the
the
Galaxy
Epic
S, but
4G.
it was the one with the keyboard. It was the only Galaxy S with the slider keyboard, and it had that WiMAX radio in it. And I felt like I was such tough stuff, man. I had like 10 megabit downloads in the middle of LA. Who could even think at that data
Man,
speed? This is amazing.
the days
Yeah,
of 2008.
right. Well, and at the same time, also like I have tens of minutes of battery life when I use that CD, that WiMAX
Yeah,
radio.
exactly. And that's basically what wasted the Evo 3D for me. So that was my first actual phone from 2012 because I got that for
Now
like
we've got a couple tweets coming in here. PN Weekly from Renato Laporte. These are actually pretty cool. First of all, he just mentions Huawei. They have really nice modems. If only they would provide them for others. Huawei make great connectivity gear, but I do believe they have yet to support CDMA, which is again why this is so sort of precious in North America. Is Verizon and Sprint combined make up a pretty sizable chunk of the U.S. carrier market. But this is
oh,
sort of not breaking news, but
this is stupid.
this was posted
Broadcom,
on
according to
Bloomberg. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bloomberg.
So Broadcom explores
Yes,
deal
we
to buy
were
chip
talking
maker
about it.
Qualcomm. This could be huge.
Yeah, apparently they're talking about a $100 bid for Qualcomm.
$100
Broadcom is,
billion bid,
and
not $100 bid.
dollars. Yeah, or that's $70 per share if you want to talk market. But
Right.
and this would be the largest. Would
This
it
would be
would
huge.
yeah, it would be topping EMC and whoever bought that. Intel, maybe. I don't know. In terms of all this, because Broadcom was in the news this week also for having reincorporated from Singapore, which they have been for a while,
Hmm.
back to the US, and they've been talking about tax reform and how the US is going to try and do that, make corporate tax reform. I'm not sure in terms of the whole repatriation thing where foreign
Hmm.
earnings have to be taxed again when they have to be brought back to the United States. If that's going to be worked into this legislation that's being crafted right now, that's been talked about and is being bandied about. So big impacts all around, and Broadcom, I think, is one of the pushers of the dominoes and could also be one of the dominoes itself
Yeah.
in this whole scheme.
No, that's true. I
Man,
mean, but the numbers on this are insane. What current valuation? Broadcom 111 billion, Qualcomm 91 billion, and they'd be seeking $100 billion bid for Qualcomm. This would be enormous if that actually went through. I wonder what kind of opposition governments would have against this kind of an acquisition.
well, I mean, there could be something with NXP because has been trying to chase NXP for $47 billion, and
Right.
they make little sound parts too. I think a lot of
Hmm.
sound parts for phones. So there's just a whole hungry hippos at the very top end of the tech sector here in terms of valuation, and they're all involved in making our phones work.
Well,
And
and yeah, and
given the
this would
fact that
immediately
prices of chips have been rising, everyone's been citing that raw material costs have been
right.
skyrocketing.
I mean, we talked about
This is
that a couple
stupid.
months ago when we were talking about battery tech too. I mean, like the materials that go into our phones are going to be facing increased competition from IoT and cars and everything else.
Now imagine that coming from one source,
One
one
source.
freaking source.
When you also combine the fact that, like Broadcom radios are also in Apple products too. So this would probably cloudy the waters on whatever kind of future deal the two companies would be able to execute. Let's just kind of shift gears here real quick. I want to point this one out because I was super proud of our buddy Andrew. Andrew Wallace, he was
Yes.
a guest commentator on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Just on his own, felt like reaching out. The Axon 7 was a fan favorite for people who like premium flagship mid-range phones, whatever you want to call them. It's a $400 phone. It's in the middle of the market. It's a mid-range phone.
Value flagships.
Okay, well, you can preface however you want. I'm saying it was probably one of the best phones of last year, and it just happened to be priced halfway in the market of smartphones, especially if you were into audio, because this was definitely one of the audio champs of last year, opposite the V20. So, Andrew, just on his own, he saw the Axon M, thought, hey, screen flipping's cool, but the Axon 7 was a great phone. I wonder if we'll get a follow up. Decides he's going to go out, tweet ZTE, and ZTE replied to him. ZTE doesn't reply to me. So I've asked about whether or not we'll have an Axon 8, but he did get a reply from ZTE, and apparently there is some notion of a follow up, hopefully, to the Axon 7.
I mean,
product.
yeah. Good on Andrew. I think timing also helped because this was after their this flagship quote unquote launch
Their dual
for the
screen.
States, which was the Axon M. And so that's the timing bit, but also every so often, just the straw that breaks the camel's back, because they're on Twitter, they're on social media, and they do get asked about all these sorts of stuff, all this sort, all stuff. My con is my conjugation correct? I don't know.
Yeah, I think, or close
Anyway,
enough. I get what you're saying.
but they get they get these questions all the time, and it just one fan on this one particular moment goes and asks the same question and is like, yeah, we're going to answer that question because now's the time that we can actually talk about this. So
Yeah. So I mean, if they
but
can follow
also
the
great
same
answer.
philosophy for an Axon 8 that we saw exhibited in Axon 7, that could be a really compelling device. I mean, we've been fans of phones like from OnePlus and Huawei in this sort of mid-pack market. But there were a few devices that I think ticked all of the check boxes for multimedia powerhouse, like the Axon 7 did. So even I know a lot of people who would have said like, just give me the exact same Axon 7, but throw in that Qualcomm 835 and charge a little bit more for it. And that would have been a 2017 dream phone for a lot of people, like the Axon 7 was a 2016 dream phone for a lot of people. So I'm very curious in what they might be able to deliver, because I think it's nice to be seeing this kind of competition start filtering more aggressively into the unlocked market.
I
And
think
an Axon
ZT,
8,
yeah, no,
well,
yeah,
I was gonna say, just to wrap it up, an Axon 8 on Amazon, as part of like Amazon's new push for unlocked phones,
oh
could be
yeah.
really exciting.
I think ZTE is having a soft year this year. I mean, they've gone through the whole having to the what was it, the Iran sanctions, where they were trading with Iran, and back in 2012, and they had to pay like a 800 million dollar
Hmm.
fine to the International Trading Commission. And then there was the thing with CSX, which was their
Yeah,
crowdsource phone thing, and that had to be retracted and reworked, and we haven't heard anything on that front. It was supposed to be talked about in September, October. Again, we haven't heard anything on that. And then there's the Axon M, which was a great opportunity, I think, to show something off on a major carrier, AT&T, and T,
hmm
and it sort of had to be this kind of thing that is an anomaly to everything else
right.
that we've worked with. So this
Well,
has been a soft year.
yeah, it definitely has. And I think as emblematic by the, because I have not held, I've not played with, and I don't mean to speak ill of the dual screen Axon M, but I do find it to be a curious entry when they delivered such a great experience on the Axon 7 to not have a follow up phone for that. But what I really hope is that we'll see a traditional carrier. Like, for example, I think Amazon is sort of the juggernaut that a lot of other retail outlets should be looking at. How can they compete against Amazon as a storefront? Um, and the way you compete against Amazon isn't to sell your products on Amazon. Right? Like that's you need to right now. You currently need to do that if you want to exist. You need to have a presence on a market like Amazon. But
Yeah.
what I would really hope to see, and I think it makes the most sense in the grand scheme of things. I think it makes the most sense for, like, say, a T-Mobile to start acting as an unlocked phone disruptor. So you could go
Mhm.
to Amazon.com and look at pictures of unlocked phones and decide whether or not you want to try and buy one of those, and potentially look at video reviews on sites like Pocketnow.com, who make phenomenal video reviews of smartphones, tablets, and wearables. Or what if you had a kiosk at a T-Mobile store where you could go in, and they aren't the official T-Mobile launch phones, but these are compatible with T-Mobile, right? You go in and you can play with an Axon 7. You know, the person at the counter can say, well, this won't support our Wi-Fi calling, but it supports everything else on our network, and you'll still have your binge on, and you'll still have your international travel, works in all these different countries, and it's guaranteed to work on our network. It's just not supported like a Galaxy phone with T-Mobile branding on the back. I think there could be something really compelling about having just one little corner, just one little chunk of retail floor space dedicated in the back of a store where consumers can engage with other types of devices and other types of products. And you would actually be able to go hands-on with that gadget in that store space and see what makes it different. I think that could be a really compelling way to try and compete against Amazon's current, and I'm sure they're going to be building into other devices too. LG releasing a bunch of their phones, including the G6, for this Amazon Unlocked sort of experience. A carrier to get into this, I think, could be a really interesting way to turn up the heat on retail competition. I can't hear you, Jules. I don't know if it's me or if it's you. Did you unplug yourself? I'm gonna have to make fun of you here.
It's off. It's now not recording anything I say. So you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity
to record the rest of your podcast from your Pixel.
From my
so
Pixel.
Everybody listening to this podcast, you're about to hear a marked quality difference in Jules's audio, and we'll have to see if the Pixel does as good a job.
Yeah, they're going to do that with the Hangouts audio in between now and then. I'm trying to figure out where the hell the voice memo thing is on this.
I don't know that there is one on the Pixel. So I ended up returning my Pixel 2. I was going to see if Marie wanted it.
Talk about that.
But we were playing with it, and it was unfortunate that I decided I didn't want to keep it. It really wasn't a phone for me. And I reached out to Google and I asked, like, hey, you know what? I bought this phone. I don't like it. My wife is really interested in it. She thinks this is going to be a good phone for her. Is there any way that we can not only transfer her account, but also buy her a protection plan, since we're still within the 2-week return window? And they were super helpful in transferring the phone over to her account, only to then say, oh, and adding a protection plan is impossible. Sorry. And so it was really disappointing that there wasn't any way to try and make that happen. I typically don't buy protection plans on my phones because I have way too many phones, and it's highly unlikely that I'll have one phone in constant operation long enough for me to worry about really damaging it beyond being able to use it. But my wife is a one phone, throw it in her purse. It's chucked around by our daughter. She needs, better support than just that. And so their only solution, even though the phone wasn't damaged, the phone was still within its 2-week return window of full price, grace period, was, well, you can return the phone and then buy a new phone and buy the protection plan with the new phone. And my wife went, well, no, I can just buy any phone then. And so we sent the Pixel back. That was really disappointing. But I don't believe there was just a straight up memo recorder on the Pixel 2. And I can't hear you again, Jules. This is some hot podcasting right now. I love this.
This is some hot crap indeed. I'm going to record this hopefully with my V20.
V20.
And this is going to be okay. The laptop mic is going to be okay for the live broadcast, at least, because life.
No, I'm really curious. Okay, so you're moving to the V20. This will be the experiment when we go back and listen to this podcast after the fact. How much did Jules' audio change going from a Zoom H2 to an LG V20? And I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll have to see
I mean, I'd want to compare simultaneous samples for that. But
yeah, unfortunately, we won't be able to do that because your Zoom H2 turned off. But we can wrap this up here real quick. I did want to touch on very quickly Sprint and T-Mobile.
T-Mobile, Sprint,
potential merger for a while.
For months, 6 months, 7 months.
Well, I mean, ever since Sprint was bought out by, was it SoftBank? We've been talking about who might blink first in merging with Sprint or buying Sprint or acquiring Sprint, and T-Mobile seems to always kind of come up as being the right merger to compete against Verizon and AT&T I kind of hoped this wouldn't happen. I rationally, I think everyone saw the writing on the wall for Sprint. It was very likely this company would get optioned by another company or acquired by another company. But I really miss having more competition in this marketplace. So I always held out hope that Sprint would find a way to build up its user base and become a bit more aggressive opposite T-Mobile and especially opposite AT&T and Verizon. But
So,
there are only so many resources for people to want to shop when looking at cell phone coverage.
so here's the point where I get into my argument with PC Mag's Sasha Sagan,
Ooh,
because he was
fight.
cheering against the whole thing too, cheering against the merger, and he tweeted the news about a week ago when SoftBank was, Masayoshi son was trying to deal and wanted to get out of the deal because he was about to lose control of one of his largest assets, which I guess is understandable. It's greed. It's part of the whole doing business kind of thing, and he has a big personality too. So he wants to exert control and do something unique and whatever. That's his prerogative, purportedly. I said this is kind of stupid because I really wished like we would have more competition, and that would be through a new carrier that would pop up somehow, or a new major player, a new fourth place player, where they would be able to act on whatever concessions go through regulatory speaking, because they would have to give up some spectrum, they would have to give
Yeah.
up some assets, they would have to give some of those away, and that would bolster a great, maybe a US cellular, even though I don't think that family is trying to expand, or someone. We've
Right.
seen Canada make its own network out, and it had Wind Mobile for a time. Back in 2008, it started up its own network and worked very hard to try and work it out. Very expensive
Yeah.
task. I understand that, but
But
the
supposedly, if we
Canadian
have this
government
free
was
market, we would want to see some road where someone could walk into this market and compete. And unfortunately, it seems like we're back into a very, a very few number of players that are controlling the mass of towers and spectrum. And like the idea of like starting a carrier today, like the amount
capitalism doesn't care if you live or die.
right. It's pretty cutthroat like that. So unfortunately, that means in a continuingly unregulated market, it's just going to become easier and easier for companies to merge or acquire, and that's where we find ourselves at today, where you know. U.S. Cellular stands as I always go Tom Brokaw whenever I say cellular. I'll sell
Cellular,
cellular south.
nuclear.
Nuclear. Sorry, I apologize to anyone. Tom Brokaw, if you're listening, that was uncalled for. Uh,
He
it's
still does a
a
good job. He doesn't care.
yeah. I'm sure he doesn't care about what I have to say about his gorgeous voice. But it's a troubling aspect of where we find ourselves now, that for T-Mobile and for Sprint to compete against AT&T and Verizon, it really does make a lot of sense for them to merge and to unite their user bases. But that also means increasingly there are fewer places for consumers to turn to if you have a problem with Verizon service. You can kind of go to AT&T, but that means maybe having to buy a new phone or going to a T-Mobile or a Sprint. And now that's increasingly becoming, and so like with the only opportunity is for a company like Apple or Google to start selling their own service. That's not necessarily addressing the problem of who actually controls the pipes and what service do you get from the person who controls the lines of access to the internet. And that is, I find that to be somewhat worrying situation that we find ourselves in today if this deal goes through. But I think it'll probably take a while to hammer out the specifics, because for Sprint being the fourth place carrier, they're still worth about half of what T-Mobile's market cap
Yeah,
is, and that's a big chunk of change to try and address if one company's looking to buy out the other.
indeed. So that's something that we have to keep on the back burner. which is still burning somehow, but
Yeah.
it's going to keep burning until it
It's
stops
just
burning.
sort of quietly smoldering. I don't know that we have a real
Quietly,
fire here, but
embers.
the embers are still glowing.
Yeah, yeah. And with that, I would say that we have an ad to read. That would be a good idea to do. You
Well,
think?
but Jules, where might someone find more information on these types of technology stories if one were so inclined to look up, really cool news sites and videos and stuff on the state of the mobile industry?
You can see full details on these stories and more. Hit pocketnow.com and look for the podcast section to get to this episode's rundown. You can chat with us about what you have been reading yourself, like Renato Laporte did.
Yeah, and thanks for sending those
on
links,
the
Renato.
week.
That was awesome.
Indeed, on the hashtag PN Weekly, and also be sure to check out Jaime Rivera and the Pocket Now Daily on our YouTube channel. All right.
Okay, so we do have to thank a sponsor this week. The Pocketnow Weekly is brought to you by App River. I'm going to go to the copy here now. If you're a business owner, you wear many hats, and some of those hats are literal, like the hats I wear, and some of those hats are figurative or metaphorical. And this is what I believe App River is commenting on. It may seem like you need an IT degree to keep your business safe from cyber attacks, especially with all the vulnerabilities that come with having email systems, networks, and devices that allow you to access anything from anywhere. So how do you stay on top of everything, keep your data and network secure, and still run your business? Pass that hat over to App River, a leader in cloud-based security solutions for businesses. With App River's premium email and virus protection, you can be sure that malware is not going to be your next headache. Take it even further with web protection that keeps your network safe from both external and internal threats, as well as email encryption, continuity, and archiving solutions that can help you face anything with confidence. Throw in Office 365 for your productivity needs, and your business can be fully optimized with no additional software or hardware requirements. Everything comes with a free 30-day trial and App River's phenomenal care customer service available around the clock from real App River employees who answer your questions in minutes rather than days. Visit appriver.com/weekly to get started today. That's appriver.com/weekly. And we thank them for sponsoring the Pocketnow Weekly.
Hooray for them, and hooray for us for being able to notch that sponsorship.
Definitely.
Yeah, I feel like we're about to...
Again, I don't know if it's you or if it's me, but we're having some fun meltdown issues on this week on this week's podcast. You went full robot voice on me. I have no idea if we're actually still connected or not.
Maybe it's all the noise that's being generated from the webcam because it has to make do with compensate for the dark background, in which case I wish I had better lighting here. I'm sorry for that.
But I'm using a really gnarly cheap work lamp. I'll send you one. It's super gross, but it seems to get the job done. We've got to talk about the Razer phone. Our own Jaime Rivera went and spent some time playing with the fruits of the acquisition of Nextbit team under the Razer umbrella, and I think they've managed to release something which is at least garnering a healthy amount of discussion. People interested in another player in this market, potential offering from a trusted brand in the world of gaming. And this is striking up a bunch of questions like gaming phones. Is this now a market that people need to start taking more seriously? Or is gaming just one of those things that on a phone isn't going to appeal to a mass market audience? And so just to break down real quick, the Razer phone, we're looking at a Snapdragon, a Qualcomm Snapdragon 835, the Adreno 540 GPU. It's a 5.7-inch Quad HD. So it is 16:9. Gorilla Glass 3 on the front face with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of UFS storage. They don't mention if it's UFS 2 or 2.1. I was assuming it probably would be at this point right now. 12 megapixel rear camera, 8 megapixel front shooter, 4,000.
12 megapixel dual camera. Come on, man. You can't forget about that f2. Yeah, there's
Oh,
a
it's the
f2.6
dual,
aperture on
the
the.
zoom sensor. That's right. That's right. I apologize. I missed the zoom sensor on this bullet point sheet here. 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which is pretty great, especially if you've been a fan of phones like Huawei's in the past. That's an excellent number of milliamp hour capacity to have. Quick Charge 4 from Qualcomm. They claim 85% charge in 1 hour, and a machined aluminum body coming with Nova Launcher as the front skin with Android 7.1.1 Nougat, backing up the guts of the software. A pretty compelling offering. Very minimal machined hardware, very low profile buttons, not really marring or distracting from the design, and front facing stereo speakers, which I think a lot of people are going to be happy about in terms of multimedia. No
But the
headphone
biggest
jack.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
that too.
So no headphone jack,
But
which is also going to be disappointing if anyone is playing a lot of games. You're using your battery more aggressively. So having headphones plugged in and not being able to charge at the same time might be a consideration for some folks. But of course, then you can just start dealing with the Bluetooths.
But the biggest flip side to that is with that bright IGZO LCD, you
Yes.
have also the 120 hertz display
Yes.
that you're playing around with, which is fire. And it's also titled Ultra Motion because you got to brand your technology like that. But it's about, it's smooth and it's great. Hopefully, all the games support that. And
well, this is what I
speaking
thought
of
was
games,
really compelling. Again, you're bringing something new to the table. This isn't just a powerful smartphone with a Razer logo slapped on the back. They are trying to make sure that their gaming DNA is incorporated in this phone. So when the discussion reaches like the frame rate of the screen scales to the actual frame rate of the app on the screen,
all the way
that's
down to 20
really
hertz.
compelling.
Yeah.
All the way up to 120 frames per second. If this phone can drive a game at 120 FPS, the screen will properly match that frame rate for the gameplay. That is actually kind of a big deal if we're talking about a multimedia device.
Yeah, and it's certainly, I mean, we have lots of multimedia to talk about here because as Razers want, they have a ton of partnerships that will help them more for a gaming phone, because when you bring out the term gaming phone, you kind of have to wonder, well, what games am I going to play on that would totally make sense. And they brought out Arena of Valor as one of them, one of those tabletop kind of things, the beat 'em ups. I don't know. I'm not a gamer, so I wouldn't know. But it's a League of Legends kind of thing going on there. And there's also a pocket edition of Square Enix's Final Fantasy 15. So fans of that franchise have lots to look forward to. Of course, you have all the Nintendo stuff, but I would say that as a richly textured thing that I've only ever played like 2 hours of, I think that's a pretty good.
I think that's
pretty good
sense of whether or not you like the game or not. But also, what I think is really interesting is this is another phone that I've seen really fronting a partnership with Honor of Kings. That was sort of thrown off. I think Oppo had something to show off with one of their last phone releases talking about this, and Tencent has been blowing that up, especially in the Chinese market, but it's become a very popular game elsewhere too. So that they're also working a collaboration with DC for Honor of Kings, where you can play DC characters
which is ridiculous.
And seeing as how I'm like a massive nut, I was totally addicted to my Marvel Future Fight. Mentioning DC characters in a game like Honor of Kings like actually has me somewhat more interested in trying Honor of Kings.
Yeah.
So I might have to break that out and see, like, if I can be Batman, always be Batman.
Man.
So yeah, that's kind of big. A couple things that we do need to mention: the no headphone jack, but it does sound like they're following the Google Pixel model for their headphone dongle. So a little less terrible, that it'll hopefully be a proper 24-bit portable DAC, as opposed to, like an HTC or Motorola.
Well, have you seen the little thing? Because it's the actual it's a chunky little thing.
Right, but what I'm hoping is unlike a proprietary dongle like Motorola's solution, where the Moto dongle only works on the Moto, it doesn't work on like a laptop. Hopefully that DAC will be compatible with any computer, like the Google Pixel dongle is. Because that could be kind of cool. Like if, say, your laptop has crappy headphone audio and you can just pop out from the USB-C port, you don't have to detach the dongle from your headphones. You can plug it into your laptop and get much better audio. That is, I think, the right way to do this moving forward. I still think it's a bummer that it doesn't have a high quality headphone jack, but this takes a little bit of the sting off. It's also not going to be water resistant. So I know some people who are concerned about an expensive phone not having some kind of IP rating. That might be a bummer there. But we are talking about a $699 phone. And
Which
that
is,
sounds like a
yeah.
lot, but that's still way less than
Yeah, I was about to say, like, that sounds like a lot, but no, it's
not
not.
anymore.
The iPhone 8 is $699. Hello to you for
Yeah.
that. And when you consider that if you took a OnePlus 5 and just boosted it up, I mean, this is kind of a sense. It makes sense that it's $700. Like, already we're seeing the OnePlus 5T get little hints and little triggers going on, and who knows what that might be priced, but we're talking about the screen technology, the audio. I mean, THX had, which is one of their subsidiaries, had to do with it, stereo speakers, and just a bunch of other kind of back flanking of franchises coming in to support this thing.
And so we ultimately have to arrive at a question, though. Is gaming a killer app that has been missing from the smartphone market? I think this is going to be a really interesting first test case, is if Razer can start building a core user base to become evangelists, really built around that idea of mobile gaming. I think it's a section of smartphone use which is often overlooked. I mean, we talk about gaming in our reviews and stuff, but I think for a lot of people out there, you're going to spend $700 on a phone. Gaming is one of those activities that kills phone batteries, right? You don't want to have your phone dead before dinner time, because you still need your phone as a primary communications device when games eat through battery life a lot more aggressively. Now, I think Razer has done exactly the right play in talking about fast charging technologies and a larger battery capacity,
thermal cooling system that they have going on,
exactly,
because that's one of their
optioning that too to hopefully keep your phone running more efficiently. And I can say I can get through a significant amount of Marvel Future Fight on my Mate 9 because this battery is ginormous compared to a lot of other devices in its class, especially a lot of other devices at its price point. So I guess I'll be really curious to see. Do you think people are going to latch onto this idea? Do you think we'll get enough people to latch onto this idea that we can build a fan base around it? Because this isn't the same argument that like a OnePlus is making.
I don't have the answer for that, but I do know that
no,
they
Jules,
are
predict
pushing
the future. You
that
will
they
be
are going to push
punished
this hard.
if you get the future wrong.
They are going to push this greatly, and this is because they have some retail flex with this, because they have their own Razer stores, of course, yes, which are far and few between. But there's also the Microsoft store for at least the North America. I'm trying to still parse out the partnership, but they have a lot of PC peripherals, so maybe they've been working with Microsoft for that. Maybe they're trying to leverage that going on. And there are also
like full disclosure, I still use the Razer laptop, so I'm very tied into their product line.
Exactly, and they're also partnering in Europe, at least for with 3, and they also worked with 3 for design and hardware, and they made an agreement like earlier this summer. So there you go. There's some movement on this phone. Whether or not the case gets made for it is that, well, maybe up to Microsoft, maybe it's up to the carriers, and hopefully.
Well, the nice thing is like it won't be for lack of trying. I think these are all of the right plays. Like, and I'll be shocked if this phone isn't available on Amazon, on B&H, on any other sort of web retailer. I'll be very surprised. So I think they've made pretty much every right move you can make in launching a new phone. Very, very few leaks, very few, spy pictures or blurry cam photos, anything like that. They controlled the narrative of its announcement. They arrived with pricing and availability information ahead of some other products that always seem to announce a phone and then not tell you how much it's going to cost or when you can buy it. And then knowing that it's going to have some decent launch partners, even if they aren't carriers, is at least showing that there's been some relationship building going on behind the scenes for this phone. We've got a bunch of tweets, a bunch of questions on this. Let's go ahead and jump into those so that we can wrap this podcast up. From Andrew Wallace, he's got a couple tweets here. Does anyone else wish that Razer had included better PC to mobile streaming solutions? I want to be able to play Civilization 5 on mobile. And what strategy do you think Razer should use in order to sell their $700 phone if they aren't going through carriers? Actually, we kind of talked about that, but I do want to talk about game streaming because we've got
Samsung has a big lead on that, first of all.
So. Well, and then also we've seen from traditional gaming platforms, Microsoft has been working on sort of game mobility, the Xbox stick, PlayStation, the same thing, Nvidia and Steam all working on how can you get a game from your PC to your living room. And then you've got, a mainstay, sort of, I think, the leader of mobile gaming, Nintendo, blurring the lines between console quality and mobile gaming quality with the Switch. I actually do kind of wish that we saw something that was, because Razer has a living room solution too. Now that I think about it, it would have been really compelling to have some kind of service that could offload a PC-driven game just displayed on a phone screen. It's just, then also I think you would have had to have had the discussion about game controller or peripheral that could interact with a phone well enough to actually control the game that you were streaming from your PC.
Yeah. And one of the odd bits that I noted while the event was going on was that they had the whole preamble about how they've become the number one in PC peripherals and console peripherals. And they also made an announcement about their streaming equipment that they have for PC. And they said, and if you're worried, and we've been out of stock for a while, stock soon. And that was one of the few times during that preamble that people actually applauded, that there was an actual strong applause. So
that's funny. Okay, sorry. I'm also going through our tweets at the same time here, Jules. I didn't mean to cut you off like that.
Well, no. It's just that when they say that by gamers, I presume that when they had trying to fill their audience, maybe that was what they were asking for. And there you go.
From Zane Winter, #PN Weekly, are you surprised Nvidia isn't making a Shield phone or partnering with Razer for theirs? Well, first of all, I seriously doubt Nvidia would be trying to partner with Razer, as I think they would view them as more of a competitor in this space. But it's kind of interesting to see, Nvidia had tried to enter the mobile space, the chipset space, with Tegra. And when Tegra didn't become a primary chipset for manufacturers to compete against Qualcomm, they seemed to lose interest in that space. I don't know. I don't see them really trying to make any other mobile gear, Shield tablets or Shield controller mobile gaming setups anymore. So I just don't think that there's enough interest in the space for them when they're more focused on streaming solutions and graphics cards.
So, I mean, the race is on. They're not necessarily in the whole, in terms of components and in terms of serving up software to stream. Like that's really the only vertical that they are competing in. But just doing hardware and micro components, I don't know how much of that means something to them in order for them to collaborate or go or not.
And then this is, and
I don't know.
Well, this is what I think is so interesting is like you're launching a phone in 2017. It's just kind of becoming, like the 2018 model year, like just with cars. We're getting into the end of this year, so it's technically next year's phone. And you don't, I mean, anyone who's walking into this space new, first of all, they just have to know that this phone isn't going to sell like crazy for the first gen, especially when it's priced at the bottom end of the premium tier of the market. But we've seen other players try. And so I'd love to have a conversation with someone internally at Razer. And I know they'd never let us kind of, talk candidly and publicly about stuff. But like, what about the timing now really made them feel that this was the right time to play, especially when they aren't trying to make the same argument NVIDIA did with console or PC quality gaming on Android powered devices. But lastly, this is from Jonas, and this made me laugh. Jonas Timothy Gamow. The Razer phone isn't worth the price without Chroma RGB.
Oh man! Look! They have the special edition. They're going to produce 1,337 elite units with the Tri-Snake Force logo at the back in green chrome. Green chrome.
That's hilarious.
Is more than anything you'll ever have in your life.
Jules, what we need is a rainbow ripple effect every time you touch the screen, just like they have on my keyboard. And that's what's going to sell some phones. There's no RGB. Come on. I'm actually shopping RGB RAM in a separate window as we speak because I've got to rebuild this workstation. And I want pretty colors on all the things. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap this up here. I think that's enough talking about that stuff.
I need to get to dinner.
Yeah, I need to eat. And I want to thank all the folks that were chatting. We saw a lot of chatter on this episode, and then all the people sending us in tweets and stuff. Don't forget, we're going to be doing our mailbag, viewer mailbag episodes at the end of each month. So shoot us those emails if you're listening to this and the recorded audio version of this podcast. And I'm going to pull up my script here to get us back out of
on track
show
and in the sack.
There you have it, folks. This episode of the Pocketnow Weekly is over. The conversation continues, though, on Twitter, where Jules is at Point Jules, and I'm humbly at Some Gadget Guy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, and our home site, pocketnow.com. For Spanish speakers, check out es.pocketnow.com. We're basically everywhere. Now, shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology and dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever else podcasts can be reviewed. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, App River. They're helping us keep the lights on here with protecting your corporate information, your corporate email. But ultimately, there wouldn't be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness. So make sure you tune back in.